Hi, my name's Toby. I'm an English language tutor at Quantum Education Group in Auckland, and I'm also an Ielts examiner here in New Zealand. And today I'd like to talk to you about how to write a good writing part one of the Ielts test. Obviously, as you can see from this question, that's from the British Council's website. You've got two bar charts. Okay, it's quite common nowadays to see two different sets of information in the IELTS Part 1. These could be bar charts, line graphs, pie charts, tables, maps, sometimes processes. But what I'm going to talk about today can be applied to all of these genres. Remember that for the Part 1 you've got about 20 minutes on this, and I wouldn't spend more than that, but it's really important that you give this a good shot. It's just as important, really, as the second part. It might carry a little less value, but it can make a difference between a band score. So first thing you should do is read the question. Okay, so here we go. It's the graphs give information about computer ownership as a percentage of the population between 2002 and 2010, and by level of education for the years 2002 and 2010. Okay, so this is the past. Okay, so when I write this answer, I should be using past tenses. Key thing here, we need to summarize the information. Okay, we're not going to give every piece of information on these charts. Okay, we're not expected to do that. We need to select and report the main features, not every feature, the main features, and make comparisons where relevant. If you want to get a higher band score, this is essential that you make comparisons across horizontally across the graph, and also, if you can, between the two. Okay, so look at the first one. What does it show? So we've got percent. Percent of what? Percent of the population. So the percent of the population that own a computer. Okay, so as we can see, over the years, over the 8-year time frame, it's gradually increased. Gradually increased from 50, almost 60% of households, sorry, 60% of the population owned a computer, to 2010 where almost 80. So it's almost a 20% increase over the 8 years, um, which is quite a lot, quite an increase. And we look at the second one, we have computer ownership by education level. Okay, so as you can see here, what strikes me is that the more educated you get, the more likely it is for you to have a computer, as that increases from no high school in 2002. Yeah, we've got about 15% to almost 80% in for postgrads. High school, no high school in 2010, a similar pattern. So the more educated you get, the more likely it is for you to own a computer. That's the overall statement for that graph. That's what I can see. So we've got a gradual increase here over the time frame, and here I can conclude that the more educated you got, the more likely it is for you to have a computer. It's essential that we carry those two statements across into our writing. Okay? If you do not include in your writing an overall statement that describes what you can see, an overall statement, you will limit your band score. It shows that you can have an overall view of the graphs. Looking at it in more detail, we'll do that in a minute, but looking at what we can see now, for bachelor's degrees and postgrad qualifications, there was the smallest growth, similar growth, but the smallest growth in the time frame. Okay, again, we're looking at approximately 30% of an increase. The biggest increase is for no high school diploma here, and in the 8 years of about, again, over 30% here. We can also make comparisons across as well. Okay, so for example, as the computer ownership increased across the population, so did it with the educational level of the population. Okay, well, so what we've got here is a model answer. This was written by a native speaker, and I just want to show it as an example of some of the language we can use and some of the style, some of the strategies that we can use in giving an answer. Okay, so what we've got here is a sentence, an introduction. Okay, it's essential that you tell the reader what information the charts give or the map gives. Okay, and here it's also important that we do not copy the language from the question. Okay, so here we've got, it shows data about computer ownership with a further classification by level of education. Okay, nice bit of language that. Okay, nice collocation. Um, uh, if we look further to the bottom of the essay, what the writer's done here, if you can read that, last thing has seen, because often we collocate, we see a substantial growth in computer ownership in general and across all educational levels. Okay, so this is the overarching statement for both graphs. Okay, this could be included in your introduction or at the end, but it needs to go somewhere. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's the beginning or at the end, but you need to include it. And again, we've got good language here, substantial growth in general across all levels. So here the writer has started writing about the first graph first. Okay, and I mentioned a gradual increase. They've talked about a steady but significant rise. Can be seen, which we had also here, in the percentage of the population. Okay, so they've given the general statement first, and then we've supported that with some data underneath it. Notice they just haven't talked about percentages. They've paraphrased a percentage, over half the population, instead of saying over 50%. Whereas, good contrasting linker, okay, you need to include words like this in your writing. 3 out of 4, 75% had a home computer. Good strategy, good language, okay? Don't just give the percentage, look at different ways of presenting the data. Third paragraph, they're writing about the second graph. There's more to talk about here, okay? So as we said, the higher levels of education correspond to higher levels of computer ownership, which is what we talked about previously in both of those years. Okay, then so that's the general statement. We've got some support in more detail in 2002. Here we've got percent of those who did not finish high school. Okay, so let's paraphrase the data. Again, rather than saying high school, no diploma, we've got of those who did not finish high school, who did not graduate high school, had a computer. But this figure, okay, of those who did not finish high school, this figure had trebled by 2010, okay? So using the past perfect tense here to talk about something that happened before a past time, okay? There are also considerable increases, okay? So we talked about substantial growth. Here we've got considerable increases of approximately 30%, okay? You don't have to give the exact figure. Words like approximately are good words to use in this kind of task. For the people with a high school diploma or unfinished college education. And so here you're giving the data in brackets, which is also fine. However, so we had whereas before, however, graduates and postgraduates proved to have the greatest level of ownership in 2010 at 90 and 95% respectively. Okay, so respectively tells us that 90% refers to the first mentioned noun and 95% refers to the second mentioned noun. Okay, again, a useful phrase to use. And then we're also showing we understand it further, 20 percentage points higher than in 2002. Okay, so as we can see, the writer here has used past tenses throughout. There's been some fantastic collocation, substantial growth, level of ownership, unfinished college education, considerable increases. Figure had trebled, yeah, it shows a good awareness of vocabulary. Some good linking words, however, whereas. Okay. We've also got a variety of structures. And the key thing is that the writer hasn't given any unnecessary, irrelevant information. They've just focused on the data, and that's all you have to do. Just focus on what you can see. But here's another part 1 task. As you can see, this one has a bar chart and a line graph. And reading the question, we've got a number of Japanese tourists travelling abroad between 1985 and 1995 and Australia's share of the Japanese tourist market. So let's look at the first chart. So we've got millions of tourists and the years 85 to 95. And as you can see, there is a, it's a continual increase, except for in 1990 where there was a slight dip, a very slight dip, and in 92, 93, a very small increase. But overall, from 85, you've got 5 million Japanese tourists traveling overseas, to in 95, we've got 15 million. Okay, that's a 10 million increase over the 10 years. And looking at the second chart, the line graph, excuse me, again we have an increase in 85 from 2 million, sorry, 2% of Japanese tourists visited Australia. To 95 we've got 6 million of Japanese tourists visit Australia. You've got over the first 4 years a rapid increase up to about 5%, then it dipped. Okay, interestingly, that dip happened when there were actually more tourists traveling overseas. Okay, a peak, one of the peaks here coincided with when fewer tourists visited Japan. That would be a good thing to mention in your writing, I think. And then it dips here, but then it gradually increases again to 94, growing by approximately 2%. But then it's falling off. Okay, the number started to decrease in 94. Okay, where in 94 the number of tourists, Japanese tourists traveling abroad, actually was generally increasing, but Australia was starting to have fewer of them. Okay, so those would be the overarching statements. We've got a gradual increase, and well, both are increasing. So more Japanese tourists, more and more Japanese tourists are traveling abroad. Although those tourists, it would seem that fewer of them are visiting Australia. But over the 10-year time frame, there has been a gradual increase. Looking for more information. Obviously, we can see that, as I mentioned before, the increase from 85 to 95. Okay, we've got it leveling off between 92 and 93, and a slight dip in 91. Okay, but the rest is pretty dramatic. The share of the market, again, from 85 to 89, you've got a rapid increase to about 5%, then a gradual increase again to 94. Okay, you could say that there are two peaks here, two peaks like a mountain peak, two peaks here in 89 and 94 with 5% and just over 6% respectively. Obviously when describing this information we need to look at other ways of paraphrasing this. Okay, so we talk about the number of tourists from Japan visiting Australia, or the number of Japanese tourists visiting Australia, the number of tourists from Japan traveling overseas, visiting foreign countries, etc., etc. Try to show range in your vocabulary. Try to paraphrase what you can see here. The answer here was given in approximately a band 5. What we can see here at the beginning is the writer hasn't given an introduction. They haven't just told us, the reader, what the graph shows. They've just immediately begun describing the information. Okay. There are quite a few grammatical mistakes, but to get a band 5 you don't have to write perfect grammar. In fact, you're looking at a band 9 if you want to do that. As we can see, the writer uses quite a repetitive form: 250,000, 500,000, 1.5, 250,000, 3/4. So there's quite a lot of repetition here. The language itself is quite repetitive. We're often using the same form. In this year, there were the year and the total. Year, 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 total. And what the writer has made, the main mistake this writer has done, is they've just given lots of information, lots of facts. If you read through that, just fact by fact by fact by fact. He's focused too much on detail, not enough comparisons, and they haven't focused on the main features of the graphs. They've tried to use some good vocabulary. Okay, we're talking about an increase starting a rate of approximately um, every year should be the rate of approximately 2% every year. Percentage dropped, steadily increased, it picked up again, a fall. So the vocabulary is quite good. Okay, in spite of the grammatical mistakes, the vocabulary brings them up a little bit. There's some clarity, but generally it's quite difficult to read. I think the writer would have improved the writing if they'd used more linking words. For example, like in addition, furthermore, however, whereas. But if we look carefully here, there are none of those. Okay. With linking words like that, they're good to use, but we have to be careful not to overuse them. We should also be looking for things like pronouns. Can we see many pronouns here? It. It. Same verb. It reached up. It reached. It stood. It reached. Yeah. It gone up. Grammatical mistake. It was. So there's not much variety there. Okay. We should be looking at maybe synonyms, other words like this, they, these, that. Okay. This is what we're trying to include. If you remember the previous answer, the writer wrote general statements and then supported them with facts. Here, the writer has avoided the general statements and gone straight into the facts. The number of tourists increased steadily till 1990 from 500,000 to 1.5 million. And at the same time, there was a fall in the figure in 1991, about 250,000 tourists, comparing the 1990. In 1992, it picked up again and gone up to... So we've got grammatical mistakes. But that aside, they're just focusing on data. They're just telling us there's facts. This is an easy way of writing. Therefore, will not score you highly. Okay. Those of you who want to be sure of getting a band 5 or 6, you need to be looking at more general statements. Comparisons like this are good. Okay. At the same time, there was a fall in the figure in 1991. That's a good thing to do. But don't get drawn into just giving lots of small details. Step back, look at the bigger picture, look at the main points and support them. Here the writer does have has attempted an overarching statement, okay, although it's not exactly clear what they mean here. Okay, so remember, they need the overarching statement, an overall view, which could go in the beginning or the end. Okay, I hope this was helpful for you, and if you have any further queries, please get in touch with Quantum Education. I'll be happy to give you more. This is the third presentation of 10 on our Ielts project. Thank you for listening.